facebook.com/Salam Media. Remember to subscribe on YouTube and follow us on Instagram at Salam Media _on air and on Twitter at Salam Media. Now, with many pharmaceutical companies racing to gain a monopoly on the coronavirus vaccine market, several countries are looking into manufacturing vaccines within their borders, and some have already begun to do so. It is, without a shadow of a doubt, countries in the global south which have fallen behind in this race. And although many countries in the developed world have started vaccinating their population, their counterparts in the developing world are nowhere near to procuring vaccines, let alone inoculating their citizens. Nigeria, however, recently released 10 billion naira, equating to about 26 million US dollars, for the local production of COVID-19 vaccines. Today, we are joined by Professor Daniel Oladimeji Oluwayelu, a veterinarian with a Master of Science in Veterinary Microbiology and PhD degrees from the University of Ibadan. He has over 100 scientific publications comprising articles in peer-reviewed, high-impact journals, technical reports, and conference papers to his credit. Professor Oluwayelu's current research interests are viral diseases of livestock, companion animals, and wildlife, as well as arboviruses, emerging viruses, and viral zoonoses at the human-animal environment interface. Good afternoon and welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon, Humairaa. It's a pleasure to be on your program this afternoon.
Thank you. So now a massive sum of money, that's 10 billion naira, approximately just over 375 million South African rands, has been set aside for the production of coronavirus vaccines in Nigeria. Do you believe that this amount is sufficient and that the funds will be distributed in an effective manner?
Yeah. Thank you so much for your question. Vaccine production is a very capital-intensive venture. And in my opinion, that amount of money may not be sufficient for the intended, because we are talking here about starting human vaccine production almost from the scratch, since the previous vaccine production lab has been moribund for about 3 decades. And we know that a lot of modern machines and equipment for vaccine production have to be purchased brand new. And these equipment, they don't come cheap, because in here of large-scale commercial production. And of course, staff with training and knowledge in modern vaccine production technologies, such as reverse genetics, recombinant DNA technology, and genomics of infectious diseases have to be recruited to make such a facility running. So I think, in my opinion, that money may not be sufficient to achieve that desired purpose.
Okay, and then over the course of the past few years, Nigeria has successfully produced several viral and bacterial vaccines for livestock, including chickens, cows, goats, and sheep. But the production of vaccines for human use has been non-existent, like you'd mentioned. Given this, do you believe that Nigeria will be able to produce COVID-19 vaccines despite its lagging behind in this industry?
Yes, I do not believe personally that anything is impossible as long as there is a will to do. The same will, determination, and sense of purpose that the Veterinary Research Institute remain in production till today and fulfill its mandate, and also make human vaccine production, including the production of COVID-19 vaccines, are possible. I think leadership of any enterprise has a lot to do with success of that enterprise. If we, for example, put a square peg in the square hole of leadership of vaccine, such a vaccine production facility, and if we recruit staff with the requisite training and experience in vaccine production, if we provide the enabling environment, including funding, then production of human vaccines will certainly be possible. So I believe, yes, Nigeria can produce COVID-19 vaccines as long as we're able to put all these things in place.
Okay, and then oftentimes grant funding is useful to such experimental processes, but that is not the case in this instant due to the fact that grants have a finite lifespan. This makes government funding imperative. Do you imagine that a situation can be reached where the production of COVID-19 vaccines receives both grant and government funding, or are these incompatible?
Yes, I think it is possible to have a two-pronged approach of government funding and grant funding to achieve success of COVID-19 vaccine production. But I think the initiative of grants or funding has to be provided by the that will require to start off with. And then thereafter, proposals for grant funding from other international bodies like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and other foundations and granting bodies, the Wellcome Trust, and then the written along the way to augment whatever government gives.
Oh.
As well, opportunity and sustainability of that project. So a two-pronged approach, can make this.
Okay, and then lastly, in order to successfully produce vaccines for its population, Nigeria must make it a priority, and the Nigerian government must place it at the forefront of its public policy. How do you imagine that it can go about doing so?
Well, what I think the government can do to ensure that vaccine production is sustainable is to make it a statutory annual budgetary allocation. I think that should be included, maybe under the Federal Ministry of Health. There should be statutory budgetary allocations to such a facility that will be saddled with the responsibility of producing those vaccines. And another idea that can come up as a policy of government is to introduce what the government has successfully done with the Tertiary Education Trust Fund, which has been used to as a subsidiary source of funding, as an alternative source of funding for universities. Is the fund, Tertiary Education Trust Fund. So if such idea has to be brought up, which a certain percentage of tax is made on the companies and corporations in the country, that out of their annual gains or profits, they remit a certain percentage into a specially set aside fund that can also help us to achieve sustainability of the vaccine production venture. Because this is currently on the rampage and may come up again in future. So those are things I think government can do in terms of policy formulation.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us today and for that interesting conversation about what it will take to produce vaccines in Nigeria.
Thank you so much, Humairaa.
That was Professor Daniel Oladimeji Oluwayelu, a veterinarian with a Master of Science in Veterinary Microbiology and PhD degrees from the University of Ibadan, talking to us about how money is just the first step in the long process that will be Nigeria producing its own vaccines. And that brings us to the end of this afternoon's show. Remember that this segment can be found on our Facebook and Twitter pages. From myself, Humairaa Mayet, and the team at Salam Media, thank you for tuning in. Until next week, Tuesday, Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon.